Awesome. So we're good. Great. So Crystal, right now we're looking at the main page of the PNOE report. It
Okay.
outlines the different elements of human physiology that are scanned through the report, through the exercise test. Um, let's start off with metabolic efficiency, which
Okay.
is at the top left corner of the report. This is a metric of how fast or slow your metabolism is, and specifically your non-resting energy expenditure. In other words, whether you're burning fewer or more calories than the average person of the same age, gender, and weight when you're
Okay.
moving.
Okay.
Our body has two, our body's caloric expenditure is divided into two big categories: resting and non-resting energy expenditure. Um, these two can move in different directions with regards to whether you're higher or lower than the average. You might have a normal resting energy expenditure, but you might have a higher or lower non-resting energy expenditure. The metabolic efficiency metric outlined in this report refers to the non-resting energy expenditure. Uh, you are slightly below the average, which is 50%, um, which isn't horrible. It isn't great. It shows that there's a downwards trend in the calories, the amount of calories that you're burning when you're moving, when you're exercising. And just to give you a little bit of a background on this, there are several factors that can lead your metabolic efficiency to go up or down. And by the way, in this metric, the higher your metabolic efficiency, the more calories you're burning. The lower your metabolic efficiency, the fewer calories you're burning.
Okay.
So, and as I was saying, there are several factors that can lead to a higher or lower metabolic efficiency. Um, Too much cardio in combination with absence of weight training is going to make you burn fewer calories because it kind of makes you more economical. That means that you are burning fewer and fewer calories for the same amount of mechanical power, for the same amount of movement, in other words, that your body is doing. Think of a triathlete, for example. He's on the bicycle and he's pedaling at 250 watts. His goal is to conserve energy, and by biking again and again and again for long periods of time, he is making his body more economical. That means that he, over time, will burn fewer and fewer calories in order to generate 250 watts. Exactly the same thing, exactly the same, result is going to occur if you are doing too much cardio, even if you're not a triathlete. And in the case of the triathlete, your goal might be to become more economical because you want to conserve energy. But for someone who wants to lose weight, is actually the exact opposite. So
Huh.
that's why we very highly always stress out the importance of weight training especially when you're on a weight loss program. It's the only natural thing that you can do that will maintain your metabolism in high levels. So that is the first metric: metabolic efficiency. Now, moving on to respiratory fitness and cardio fitness. These two metrics show the extent to which your pulmonary system, in other words, your lungs, or your cardiovascular system, in other words, your heart, are posing some sort of limitation to your ability to work out. Here, we don't see any of them being a limiting factor. Your cardio fitness is slightly lower, um, and that is because we saw a flattening of the amount of oxygen your heart is pumping into your body after a specific intensity. And that is, probably due to some sort of general deconditioning. Maybe it was just, it wasn't the perfect day to take the test, etc. But it's not something alarming. Usually, what you do in order to get these two scores up is HIIT training. In other words, threshold training close to your anaerobic threshold. This is what's going to train these two systems, and this is what's going to push cardio fitness and respiratory fitness upwards. Um, the the limiting factor that might exist in either your respiratory system or your cardio system might either be general deconditioning, as we saw in the case of your cardio score, or it might even be a disease. In fact, this type of assessment, if you do it in a medical setting, is actually one of the most efficient ways and effective ways for determining, for identifying the presence of a pulmonary disease or a cardiovascular disease. But let me obviously stress out that that's not, that's a fitness assessment. It's not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Um, Moving on now to the other metrics that are, gaining a lot of popularity, which are breathing cognition and then breathing and mobility. These two metrics are basically a reflection of the same underlying mechanism, which is hyperventilation. They are driven by the extent to which you are hyperventilating. And they are, and let me just explain a little bit more around why hyperventilation is affecting your cognitive capacity and your ability to stand effectively. So hyperventilation is the state at which you're breathing against your metabolic requirements. In other words, you are breathing too rapidly, and you're blowing off too much CO2. When you're blowing off too much CO2, through a series of chemical processes, that causes vasoconstriction to the arteries leading to the brain. That is going to limit the amount of oxygen that goes to the brain, and that will ultimately limit your brain's ability to operate to 100% of its capacity. That's why hyperventilation is probably the most impactful driver of your ability to think and react rapidly. Hyperventilation isn't something that only occurs when we are in highly stressful situations, like an earthquake happens, or there's some sort of panic around us and we start to breathe rapidly. A lot of people, in fact, roughly 10% of people worldwide chronically hyperventilate, meaning that they are in a condition where they are breathing against their metabolic requirements. And because that condition has become chronic in nature, they are kind of unaware that it's there. They have gotten used to it, in other words, but still they are breathing incorrectly, and that is impacting the oxygen flow to their brain. And in fact, a lot of people have actually linked that have actually linked that as being a source of a lot of neurodegenerating diseases like Alzheimer's disease, because at the end of the day, every organ in the body is going to slowly degrade over time when you are slightly restricting oxygen. Oxygen is life for everything. The moment you restrict oxygen to something, that's going to cause issues. So making sure that you're not hyperventilating is extremely important for your long-term health, but also very important for your short-term ability to use your brain as effectively as possible. Now, with regards to breathing and mobility, the mechanism through which hyperventilation affects mobility is the following. When we're hyperventilating, we're breathing with our chest, we're not breathing with our bellies. That causes loss of abdominal pressure, which is extremely important for support to the lower back, which is the most common case of musculoskeletal problems in general population. as a matter of fact, poor ventilation mechanics, in other words, poor breathing, is the strongest predictor for whether someone is going to develop mobility issues and lower back pain in the long term. So again, breathing correctly is extremely important. Now, moving on to fat burning efficiency, that is one of the things that, as you saw in the test, in the data from the test, one of the things that we measure is how much fat your body is burning in different conditions. And in every person, fat oxidation is going to deteriorate as intensity increases. The big question is, how rapidly does it deteriorate as intensity increases? In other words, how capable is your body? That's the million-dollar question. How capable is your body when it comes to maintaining fat oxidation as intensity increases? Again, we got a good score here. It's not perfect. It shows that there is room for improvement. What we normally do in order to increase fat burning efficiency is we train in our fat max zone, which is actually determined through the test. We're going to show the zones later in this report. Yeah, training at zone 2, which is the fat max zone, is going to be your best ally when it comes to increasing fat burning efficiency. Lastly, we have aerobic health, which is a metric that is based on your VO2 peak. VO2 peak, which is the maximal oxygen consumption. Some people know it as VO2 max. The right term is VO2 peak because it refers to not your absolute physiological maximum. It refers to the maximum that was attained during the test. That's why we use the term VO2 peak versus VO2 max. VO2 peak is what drives this metric. And the higher your VO2 peak, the higher your aerobic health. The higher your VO2 max is, the more capable your body is in maintaining high levels, high intensity exercise for longer periods of time. Also, high VO2 peak is the strongest predictor for whether someone is going to die or develop any sort of chronic disease. So VO2 peak is the best indicator for current and long-term overall health. And then lastly, the type 1 and type 2 muscle fiber composition. This is something that we are able to estimate based on your mechanical efficiency. Because if you think about it, what we did when we tested you on the Peloton is that we were actually measuring the watts on the Peloton bicycle, and then we also had the PNOE system on. That means that we were actually measuring how many calories you were burning. By taking the ratio of the two, we are basically able to measure the efficiency ratio of your body. In other words, the efficiency with which your body is transforming chemical energy, which is calories, into mechanical propulsion, which is the watts that we read on the Peloton bicycle. Now, lots of studies have shown that this efficiency ratio is highly correlated with the types of muscles that we have in the body. Our body has two types of muscle fibers. One is the type 1, which is the slow twitch. This is what we use when we do cardio and endurance types of movements. And then we have type 2, which is a fast twitch, which is what we use when we do explosive movements. In line with what we saw in your metabolic efficiency, which is trending downwards, you are more type 1 dominant in the sense that most likely because of the fact that you do a lot of Peloton, you do a lot of cardio style movements, you are more your muscle fibers are have more type 1s than type 2s. Type 1s are also more economical as muscle fibers. In other words, they are able to produce the same amount of work with less calories. Um, However, they cannot exert very high amounts of energy in short periods of time. That's why when you lift something heavy, you need to start to utilize type 2 muscle fibers, which are less economical. They burn more to generate a specific amount of work, but they are able to exert higher amounts of energy in short periods of time.
Hmm. Wow.
So, yeah, so that was a lot of information right there. Um, so, questions.
I mean, overall, like, is this pretty good for somebody my age? Is this pretty bad for somebody my age? How am I doing?
It's above average. There are areas for improvement. The most important area for improvement would be metabolic efficiency. You want to have a high metabolic efficiency. You want your non-resting energy expenditure to be high. A slowdown in non-resting energy expenditure has been shown to be the number one physiological driver behind weight gain or weight regain. So very important to note here, just because you're economical, it doesn't mean that you will inevitably gain weight.
Right.
Triathletes are extremely economical and are stick figures. Why? Because they are always burning a lot of calories because they're always exercising. However, if you are a person that is not, a recreational or competitive athlete and you're not exercising all the time, etc., and you don't have that daily bonus of a lot of calories being burned because of your workout, you want to make sure that when you're in an ambulatory state, you're moving around, you're doing things, you want to make sure that you have high levels of caloric expenditure, because this is what ultimately will protect you from weight gain or weight regain.
Okay. And if I heard you correctly, um, weight training has a lot
Yes.
to do with
Yes.
increasing that.
Yes. Lift
Okay.
heavy things. This is
Okay.
where it all starts. It all starts under the squat rack, as we say.
Okay.
Uh, Cardio is extremely important. That's not what I'm trying to say. Cardio is going to impact the respiratory fitness, is going to impact cardio fitness, is going to impact fat burning efficiency. Something else that I do need to stress out about fat burning efficiency, it is the hallmark of cellular health. Cellular health is ultimately our cells' ability to utilize oxygen. So the more capable they are in utilizing oxygen, the more fat they will be able to utilize. Fat is a fuel source that can only be burned through the utilization of oxygen. So, all of these things are driven through cardio, but we should not neglect strength training. Extremely important for maintaining high metabolic rates, extremely important for maintaining bone density, extremely important for preventing musculoskeletal problems in the long term. Um, what we always like to say is the following: cardio ensures a long life, strength training ensures quality of life.
Okay.
We need both.
Okay. Okay. All right. That was great.
Yeah. And now moving on. So everything that I just described is outlined here. Cardio fitness, respiratory fitness, explanations, pretty much a summary of what I just described is here. Um, and here we have a recommendation of how the workout should look like. A person's workout should be basically a combination of strength training, HIIT training, and cardio training. Um, uh, Given the fact that, and this recommendation is built on, uh, first of all, your metabolic profile as measured through the test, and then secondly, based on your fitness goal. And the fitness goal that you declared in the app was fat loss. For fat loss, the most important thing, as we said, is making sure that you have high levels of caloric expenditure. We lose fat by basically either slowly reducing weight or maintaining weight and then building muscle. This is why our fat loss programs will almost in every case start off with a large amount of strength training. And you also obviously get 2 HIIT cardio days, 2 HIIT days and 1 cardio day in addition to your strength training. But we want to make sure that you get at least 3 times per week of strength training there. And then with regards to your training zones, which will inform your cardio and HIIT, training zones are not for strength training. They cannot be applied there. These zones are for your cardio training. So what you do with your Peloton. So we have the standard 5 zone system. Zone 2 is your fat max zone. This is where you do your long rides. Zone 4 is where you do threshold training. It's kind of the heart rate zone that you are able to maintain for not a very long period of time, not for hours. It's something that you are able to maintain for 30, 40 minutes at maximum, and then die. It's similar to your FTP. It's much more accurate though than your FTP. And then so this is basically the 5 zone system. Highly recommend that you start applying that when you go on your Peloton rides. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, so help me look. Okay, could go back up just a page there, or where the little graph was. Okay, so when you say 60% strength, and I see you have like 3 days in there, how long are we talking for those strength sessions?
Okay, so we don't go into discussing exactly the duration and the type of equipment and the
Okay.
type of exercises in this report. The reason why we don't do that is because this report is meant to be generated after going through the test and after completing some basic information on the app. We have a separate service where we provide detailed guidance on what the strength training should look like, what the cardio training should look like, what the HIIT training should look like. But in order to provide that, we obviously need medical history, injuries, access to specific equipment, what you like, what you don't like, et cetera, et cetera. I can't prescribe squats and Olympic weightlifting if you don't have access to a place where they have barbells and squat racks. Just to give you an example of why we can't really provide a detailed workout plan here with the information that we have just from the test. But if you're working with someone, etc., like obviously we can interface with them. That's something that we do for our customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I had was on the HIIT training. Is there, like traditional HIIT training is what, 1-to-1? So is that your recommendation? Because I know people kind of, there's a lot of things that can be prescribed to HIIT training. So is that a 1-to-1 or is that a 2-to-1 ratio? What are your thoughts on that?
So usually 1-to-1 ratio is a good starting point. Obviously, it depends a lot on the type of equipment that you're using. A 1-to-1 ratio is good for a bicycle. It might start to get a little bit tough when you're using devices that are still considered aerobic exercise but are more tough, like the rower. So again, it's highly dependent on the type of equipment that you're using. But as a general guideline, for those who are in a weight loss journey, just trying to be healthier, etc., sticking to 1-to-1 is a simple rule of thumb that is gonna yield results.
Okay.
We get the most out of our workout when we apply the simple guidelines in this report. It doesn't really matter for the average consumer whether you're doing 2-to-1 or 1-to-2 when you're doing HIIT training. The basic stuff is to make sure that You're doing your HIIT training. It's actually HIIT training. You go high and then you recover. You go high and then you recover. And you actually do strength training. You go out the gym, you lift weights. You don't do like, body weight type of training and then a little bit of HIIT and then you consider that strength training. You do your strength training and then you also do your cardio training in zone two. If you do these things, you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck out of the time you're investing in your gym and your fitness in general. So making sure that you get these things dialed in your fitness is going to yield 80-90% of the outcome that you're looking for. And yeah, when we get there, yeah, definitely come back and we'll discuss more around how we optimize hits. Trust me, there are countless of peer-reviewed articles around the different types of hits and the different metabolic adaptations that you can induce through HIIT training. By no means is this relevant for the average consumer.
Okay. And when you say like go hard, should I be going to like a zone 4 or a zone 5?
So zone 4, and then sometimes venturing into zone 5, for short periods of time is good enough. Make sure that you are at least in zone 4. You will see that, based on your fatigue and based on your current status, it might be hard to, control whether you're only in zone 4 or you're branching out in zone 5 a little bit. But again, don't be too concerned about that. What you
Okay.
should be concerned about is making sure that you get the work to rest ratio there and that, you're sticking to that.
Okay. Okay, great. That's great.
So that was pretty much it. We always hope that the results are useful for our users, and we always look forward to getting your feedback after you apply that program. And in about 2 months, when you start to apply changes, it's always a good idea to retest to see that we're actually taking you in the right direction.
I would love to do that. That would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Crystal, thank you so much. And